So, I think it's probably about time we talk about this. Okay, so I might be a little bit late to the game here, but today we're going to be talking about the Pixel 7 Pro, and there's probably a good chance that you've watched a review or two, or maybe even a dozen, but I honestly want to just spend a little bit extra time with this device this year before giving you a full look and unveiling some of my thoughts on this smartphone. The question is, how much time have I actually spent on it? Well, I've actually been using the Pixel 7 Pro since it was announced. Google actually didn't send me a review unit. Instead, I had to spend my own money on this phone, which honestly I think was money well spent. So let's dive into it. For those who don't know, the Pixel 7 Pro launched alongside the Pixel 7 in mid-October. So that's been about 3 months now that I've been using as my full device day to day. If you are simply just looking at the specifications, the 7 Pro may not seem like a huge upgrade over the 6 Pro. On paper, it seems like it might have pretty much the same camera setup on the back. The internal processor powering the device isn't a huge upgrade over the previous model, and the only real difference in the design might actually be the camera visor on the back. But honestly, that's the feature that I love the most about the look and feel of this phone. So let's start things off there. Personally, I wasn't a huge fan of the camera visor that Google used on the Pixel 6 Pro since it felt like it was just tacked on to the back of the phone. With this one, Google's seamlessly integrated with the frame of the phone, giving it just a more cohesive look. And honestly, I think this is one of the most distinctive looking smartphones right now that's on the market. You really can't confuse it with anything else. But one issue that some people are having is with micro scratches on that visor itself. But honestly, I haven't had that issue, and I keep it case-free 95% of the time. Another more subtle design tweak that you won't really notice until you hold the phone in your hand is actually the placement of the power button and the volume rocker on the edge of the phone that have been slid down about 10 millimeters from where they were on the previous device. This makes it a lot easier to turn the display on and off without having to readjust your grip of the phone. It's a nice touch that's definitely appreciated. Overall though, there are just a handful of subtle design tweaks and refinements that make the phone look and feel better than its predecessor. Unfortunately though, like many other Android manufacturers, Google still thinks that high-end devices still need a curved display. I really don't know what they're thinking here. While it's not as pronounced as it was on the 6 Pro, the curved edge is still there. Now, I get it. Curves make larger phones feel a little bit more comfortable in the hand, but they're just annoying when it comes to typing on the display. Fortunately, there is enough bezel around the edges of the display that it's not a huge issue, but I'd really love it if Google would just give us a flat display on next year's model. So let's move on to performance and battery life. And I'm not really going to spend too much time here because the Pixel 7 Pro isn't that much of a difference over the Pixel 6 Pro. The Tensor 2 chipset inside of this phone isn't a huge improvement or even a noticeable improvement over the Tensor 1 chipset. Even if you're running benchmarks side by side, it's honestly that close. That being said, the chipset is fine-tuned for AI process improvements and packs a next-generation TPU that is 60% faster at handling machine learning tasks like processing night sight shots that are now twice as fast on this phone as opposed to the predecessor. And you also get a new feature with real-time background blur for video mode. Though, as someone who really loves improvements year over year, it's somewhat disappointing that this phone isn't noticeably faster than last year's model. But honestly, I can't say that I'm really disappointed with the performance. The UI is still as snappy as always. The 12 gigabytes of RAM is more than adequate for heavy multitasking, and the phone can still play any game that you want at high settings. A device like the Galaxy S22 Ultra will still deliver a slightly better frame rate on some of those games, but for most people that are out there, you're really not going to notice the difference or even care. As for the software experience, the phone is running on Android 13 right out of the box, and we'll be getting 3 years of software updates and 4 years of security patches, with the full Google experience as well. It's nothing flashy, but I do like the stripped down version that Google's had on its software and how it's been refining it over the last couple years. The only thing that still bugs me is that you still can't use custom icon packs. Android's native themed icon feature is getting more popular with third-party application developers like Telegram, WhatsApp, and Galaxy Wear, and a couple hundred others as well, but it's still an odd experience when you turn that feature on and then you just see mismatched icons on your home screen. It's just not as cohesive as it needs to be. On paper, it doesn't look like the cameras on this device have really been upgraded over last year's model, but Google has made a few changes that are actually quite significant. I have to say, this is the best Pixel yet when it comes to capturing photos and especially videos as well. The primary 50 megapixel sensor hasn't changed here, but the zoom camera has gotten a sensor upgrade along with a bump from 4x zoom to 5x with that periscope lens. It doesn't sound like a huge difference, but it's definitely something that you're going to notice the first time that you open the camera app. Since there's such a wide gap between the two focal lengths, Google's also added in a 2x digital zoom to that main camera, which is a nice touch. But the upgrades didn't stop there. The main complaint that I had with last year's Pixel 6 Pro was that the ultra-wide camera really wasn't as useful since it wasn't that much wider than that main sensor. Well, with this device, Google actually listened to those complaints and gave the Pixel 7 Pro a much wider lens with the ultra-wide camera, increasing the field of view from 144 to 126 degrees. And then there's the selfie camera that's been upgraded with a new sensor as well. Some might see this as a little bit of a downgrade because it's a resolution drop down to 10.8 megapixels, but the overall image quality and video quality that you get is definitely an upgrade here. Overall, if you want the most rounded camera experience on an Android device, the Pixel 7 Pro is my #1 choice. Google's computational photography is better than anyone else's, and I honestly have to say that that's translated over to video capture as well this year, something that Google's been struggling with quite a bit over the last couple years. There are still some issues with focus tracking from time to time, but you can adjust that by tapping the screen to lock in on your subject. But the overall quality is much better than the Pixel 6 Pro and other devices we've seen from Google in the past. Google's also jumping onto the cinematic video mode bandwagon like every other manufacturer. And as you can see, the background behind me is blurrier than what it should be, but it's not perfect, especially when you introduce things like your hands into the shot. The cutouts aren't exactly what they should be and not as good as what you get out of portrait mode, but that technology has been refined and perfected, not quite perfected, but refined quite a bit over the last couple years that it's been used, and cinematic video mode is going to get better as well. We just got to wait a little bit longer. Oh, and I do need to touch real quick on the new photo unblur feature in Google Photos that's exclusive to the Pixel 7 series. It essentially uses AI to unblur images that you've captured with this device or any other device as long as those photos have been uploaded to Google Photos. And recently, I've actually been scanning in old family photos that have been captured on old point-and-shoot cameras way back in the 90s. And as no surprise to anybody, a lot of those photos are blurry. And it's not like it magically fixes all of your images, but when you have select images and it works just right, it's really a magical experience when you see a photo that you've been looking at for the last 25 to 30 years magically come to life with faces that unblur, and you see things that you've never seen before. I know things are getting long, but I just realized that I forgot to talk about battery life. And you get a 5,000 milliamp hour battery with this phone with 23 watt charging and 15 watt wireless charging, which is exactly what we got on the previous model. But what has changed is the Tensor chipset, which is slightly more efficient and also has different radios from Samsung for 4G and 5G connectivity as well. This translates into slightly better battery life, but also noticeable improvements to connectivity as well. The average user is still going to need to charge the phone once a day, but for those heavy users out there, you'll probably have to worry less about those mid-range charges than you had to on the previous model. And that's going to do it. I'd say for $900, the Pixel 7 Pro is an exceptional phone. Now, it doesn't have all the bells and whistles that you can get on a Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, but those phones are also $400 more expensive than this device here. Also, Google's been discounting the 7 Pro quite a bit lately, and you can easily pick one up for $800 or even $750 from time to time. You just got to look out for those deals. My only hesitation in recommending this smartphone to everybody is the fact that the Pixel 7 is $300 cheaper than this device and still offers 90% of what the 7 Pro has to offer. You simply have to sacrifice the zoom camera on the back and the larger display. But for some people, that's an easy choice to make. Let me know what you think of the Pixel 7 Pro. And if you haven't seen my camera comparisons with the 7 Pro versus a lot of the other flagship devices that are on the market, make sure you check those out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.